Is up, sexy people. It is Dave, it's Duncan, it's Kyle back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. And for this review, Duncan, Kyle and I have been checking out the new album from Fern, a new project fronted by the drummer of The Ocean, Paul Seidel. Fern's new album, Intersubjective, will be released on September 30th via Pelagic Records. Okay, so with his new solo project, Fern, the Ocean drummer explores a musical palette beyond the extreme metal he's known for. The musical world of Fern is like a midnight metro ride past flickering lights and across shifting tracks. It is a brooding metropolitan world where nothing is what it seems and where marvel and menace coexist at the same time. The city at night can be a deceitful place. Pleasure can quickly turn into pain, and beauty can be found in the murkiest of places.
Sounds like a Duncan Tuesday night out of town.
Yeah. Likewise, Fern can be both dark and light, both distant and intimate, and both soothing and punishing. Combining pop sensibility with experimental production and incredible attention to detail, Fern harnesses the incredible musical and literary poetry of Paul Seidel. I'm not sure how you pronounce his surname, apologies. Standing on the shoulders of great electronic pop artists like Nine Inch Nails, Depeche Mode, and Bjork.
Hopefully they have strong shoulders if he's standing on them.
Yeah.
That's as good as the jokes are getting tonight, lads. It's dad jokes. I am on the hot cocoa.
Oh, wow.
No alcohol tonight, so the jokes are going to be shite.
Running from emergence to afterlife, Intersubjective seemingly makes up the story of a lifetime, and it instantly invites us to relate ourselves to the music. By taking analog instruments and distorting their sounds, they become indistinguishable from their source, creating a sense of alienation that resonates with the dysphoria of being a physical being living in a world that becomes increasingly digitalized. The album was written, performed...
Digitalized. You sounded a bit digitalized saying that.
The album was written and performed by Paul, then produced and mixed by Jan Kircher at Ghost City Recordings, with co-production also being handled by Paul Seidel. So
pronunciations on
I don't know
this particular episode.
Just call him Paul from now.
Paul would have been Paul from the Ocean.
Paul from the Ocean.
Sounds like he's really wet.
Kyle.
I've not had a drink, so I can't even.
See, wasted on him, Kyle.
Yeah, wasted.
So basically, when I was reading the press release and it was like dropping names like Nine Inch Nails and Bjork, I was like, right, I'm instantly thinking of Duncan and Kyle right now.
This is how shallow he has.
And then when I saw,
you weren't thinking Duncan and Kyle when that Nickelback song came in last week,
no,
weren't you?
I was being completely selfish.
Exactly.
But then when I read drummer of The Ocean, Dave was then intrigued. Duncan and I have just seen The Ocean literally a couple of weeks back in Glasgow, so we're still riding on that wave of how good they were live.
Fun.
Do you like that?
Yeah.
And Paul is a fantastic drummer, so I was definitely interested in hearing more of his solo project. Duncan, Kyle, I'm going to hand over to you guys, the electronic industrial
gurus. I have not a fucking clue how to approach this, so let's hand it off to someone else who
I have thoughts,
stuff.
But I feel like this album is probably more in your wheelhouses.
Oh, you used the wheelhouse high. That's plural.
Kyle.
Hello.
Tell me, what did you think about this new solo project from Paul, the drummer from The Ocean?
It was not clear it was from the drummer of The Ocean. And I read the notes and I still skipped over that fact somehow. So that's news to me. That's great. Okay. I listened to this album once.
Oh.
And then I went to the website and bought the t-shirt. And then I listened to it about 8,000 more times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did not know what to expect. When the first things came in, I was like, that sounds like trap hi-hats. Why are there trap hi-hats in a metal release? Hang on a minute, this isn't metal. What the fuck is it? Then the synth came in and I was like, okay, my stomach has now fallen out of my ass and I am in some sort of electronics-fueled heaven. holy fuck, did I like this? I thought nothing could top Krilla from Author and Punisher this year.
Ooh.
I don't know if this is going to top it or not yet. I am like,
Interesting.
It is like contending for the number one spot of the whole year. Like,
Wow.
I know. I'm like, I did not expect it, especially when the name was Fern. I was like, okay, plant from the forest. What can we expect from this?
Yeah.
Apparently, to kick my ass.
You had a gully on the end of that, a moderately interesting anime from the 90s that was trying to stop the world from cutting down trees,
Right.
but we still
Someone
did it.
take that cocoa off of him and give him a bottle of whiskey or something.
Just sprouting facts about anime. Fair enough. All right.
The brain is fired up tonight.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Oh man. No, I got deep into this one. And what I think I like about it is the very like carefully crafted balance of like organic stuff and electronic stuff. There's like a few organic things here and there. Like the voice is very organic for the most part.
Yeah.
But there's also all of the electronics as well. But then sometimes he puts on this like auto-tune harmonizer effect thing, and it's crazy. And I really like what he does with that, because it's like a what's the word? It's an artistic choice to use auto-tune and harmonizing and stuff, and it's not like a production crutch that he's leaning on. And he only does it here and there towards the end of the album. And I was like, wow, that's really like, when you use it right, it could really work super well, which is good for this album. And listened to it 8,000 times, I'm not kidding, it was quite a few. You notice that everything that is in this album must have some sort of meaning. It feels like every single sound and element is placed like super carefully. There's like no extra little bits here and there. There's no like weird production ear candy tricks. There's no like just fancy things for whatever reason, or like, oh, that's a cool riff, I'll just repeat it 4 times and go on to something else. It really feels like every single thing was very, what's the word? On purpose. I can't think of the
Deliberate.
Deliberate, that's the word. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, very, very, very deliberately done. Absolutely everything. And I was like, wow, this feels like everything was just crafted really, really well. And especially when it comes to the production, like clearly electronic elements, electronic instruments, you can fall into the trap of over compressing and over EQing, because with the electronic instruments, you can kind of get away with a lot of EQ choices because they're not natural. So you can just sort of make a decision and run with it. But with this, it just feels like they took the best parts of what the sound was in the synth and the electronic instruments and just sort of made those what they were, and they didn't try to do anything too artificial with it. And it sounds natural and raw but digital at the same time. It's really hard to nail down how it sounds. It's all very analog and warm, and I think that's because they use analog synth and stuff, but it's like this, it doesn't feel too over processed or too over produced or anything like that, if you know what I mean. Especially when that bass guitar comes in. Fucking hell. I can't remember which song it's on. I noted it down, but it's just like, oh my god, it's incredible. It's like track 2 or 3, and Jesus Christ, it's like, woof. Some moments on this album are just like, how did you come up with that? What is going through your head? You're a drummer. Come on. No,
hey. Oh, none of that, Kyle.
Standout moment as well on Shadows. There's like a vocal arrangement between him and I think a backup vocalist or a sample or something, and it's absolutely fucking genius, and it blew me away, and it gives me chills every time I listen to it. So yeah, I thought it was right.
Nice
one. Duncan, what be yourself?
Yeah, I should like this more, but I'm going to be a little bit of a contrarian here.
Oh, interesting.
Hold my hand and let's walk up the contrarian path. I think there's a really good EP in here, like a really good 5-track EP, which I think shows off a tremendous amount of talent and an interesting concept. I think it is slightly bogged down by songs that are not instantly not easy to differentiate upon the listen. In 2 or 3 instances, I think songs are very, very, very similar until you get to them about the midway point where the songs break out, and at that point you can identify things like choruses and verses a little bit easier. But I think there's a there's a tendency to opt for very, very, very similar constructions at the start. And that's kind of a downside for me, because on the tracks where we have specifically guest vocals and some of the later tracks on the album as well, I think he really does put a huge amount of time making sure that there is an individual kind of feeling element. Now, you could argue that if what he is saying in his statement, which I didn't read, the kind of concept behind this one is a flowing concept, that would kind of make sense. But that being removed, as a listen, there are sections here which I don't think live up to the higher moments of the album. So when this is on point, it's really fucking good. It's like a really good example of kind of almost kind of that kind of dark pop, kind of industrial stuff that is out there, and some artists are particularly good at it, some aren't. I think it certainly shows its influences on its sleeve. I think there's clear nods to Depeche Mode. It's kind of Depeche Mode early 90s, where they were all dark and gothic. And Nine Inch Nails, in some respects, I think the kind of use of the kind of more industrial drum sound is definitely in the Nine Inch Nails wheelhouse. Shadows, which was the track Kyle was talking about, has a sampled kind of or that sort of thing that they're playing on notes. That is very reminiscent of a Nine Inch Nails. Out with that, doesn't really sound like Nine Inch Nails at all. Maybe some of the elements that are done on some of the Ghost instrumentals, where you can kind of feel texture and atmosphere, and it's got that in there. I just kind of found myself upon repeat listens kind of not enjoying it as much as I did on the first listen. So on the first listen, I was kind of like, yeah, this Down Clown on this is a nighttime album. This is, sit in the dark, a couple of neon lights in the background, and this is chill. This is chill as fuck. And then about the third or fourth listening, I kind of started picking out the fact that there are those sections which feel very similar between tracks. And I don't know if that's because this is something that he's maybe not... We get this sometimes with solo artists or people that go on to do a solo project, and that they tend to write in a particular cadence, in a particular key. And when they're releasing something for the first time, it tends to be all very much of that. But I mean, like, notwithstanding some of those complaints, it's very well written. Vocals are great. I think it's very hooky in parts, which surprised me because it doesn't start off that way. I mean, you start off with essentially this amalgamation of kind of dark pop and kind of folk, kind of, almost Scandinavian folk singing, which is kind of crammed in together. It's very, very, very bizarre. Totally fucking works. And then by the time you're reaching tracks like Hyperreal, which is like classic banger on the release here, that could be a single if it isn't already. And then the next guest appearance that we have here, I really liked this as well. I thought it kind of broke things up again for me. And then from there, it's a progression of songs which I'm totally invested in, that I think are really well done, like I Am Transient, Intersubjective, and Shadows. And Emergence, not so much. Rupture, not so much. And Afterlife's a closer is a fine closer if I hadn't already heard ideas and concepts like this done throughout the album already. It feels like a really nice way to bring it out, but because we've had so many moments like that, it kind of just feels like another track, where I actually kind of feel like what would have been interesting is if he turned it on its head and finished with something a bit more punchy. So yeah, I'm kind of at odds with it. I think it's very well produced. I think it's very well done. But to me, there's a couple of songs which don't reach the same level as some of the other ones. And in this sort of genre, you're kind of looking for an album like front to back, of a really high quality in songwriting. I think the tracks aren't as good, are noticeably not as good on subsequent re-listens. However, if he's coming from a drumming background, and this is some dabbling and a little bit of dark pop and kind of synth and electronica, then he's doing a lot better than what I could do, and this was my instrument, so fair play. So yeah, like I say, I should, on paper, this should tick all the boxes for me. But in a world, especially in a year, slightly against what Kyle has said, where Author and Punisher have released an album which has topped my list, I think there's a noticeable difference in kind of songwriting in this genre between the two. they're not even really comparable, to be honest. They're on darker sides. You know, one's aiming for ambience and atmosphere, while the other one's aiming for kind of intensity and kind of hooks. So yeah, I'm waffling now. And like I say, I should really like this a lot more than I do. On the first listen, it totally grabbed my attention. By listen number 4, I was nitpicking on every listen afterwards, which is why I stopped listening to it at the weekend. Because I was like, if I keep listening to this, I'll give it a grade, which doesn't feel fair by the time we get to record. So there we go.
Okay.
What about you, David? Or as I'm going to start calling you now, Mr. Digital Man, the Dave Bot 4000, right? Big Davey Bot. What did you think?
Well, industrial electronic music for me, is a bit kind of hit and miss. The industrial stuff can be a little bit too repetitive as a genre for me, unless it's got some sort of hook or melody. Author and Punisher are a great example of that already this year, as you said. Like they managed to create that kind of industrial vibe, but with vocal hooks and stuff as well. I think I also tend to connect with more kind of modern styled industrial or electronic bands. I actually quite like that Zeromancer album we did a while back. Or even I quite enjoy like stuff like Blue Stahli and things like that as well. Don't mind that. And actually, I could hear there's a couple of similarities between Fern and Blue Stahli in places. It's more kind of a modern take on the genre. This is not like cold and machine like. It doesn't sound like a Ford Escort being built. You know what I mean? It's you know what I mean. It's kind of.
You know what that sounds like.
I imagine anyway. This is.
I imagine that's what Ministry sounds like. Touché, David.
This is more warm. It's got plenty of kind of like ebbs and flows and the intensity of the album through the use of kind of varied synths and different electronic instrumentation. But I like that the album does have like a little kind of element of a kind of human touch as well. You know, you do like Hyperreal has got some real drums on it as well. You know what I mean? So you do get little splashes of that. It's not just completely kind of electronic or industrial. And I think I have to say, like, Paul has a fantastic voice. Very soulful. It's very good.
Does he do backup vocals in the Ocean?
I think he does.
I think he does. Because there was a quality of it that was like that, unless they got the guy in.
Yeah.
Like, here, Ocean friend, whose name I can't remember, go and jump in and do some vocals here, because it just sounded so familiar.
Yeah, great voice, and he's got a good kind of alternative, almost kind of pop sound to his voice. His melodies are very clean. He's got a really good range. He doesn't just sit in like one place for the whole album. It's nice and varied, and like his timing, you know, being a drummer is also absolutely spot on in this album. I really liked some of the kind of rhythmical patterns he uses vocally throughout the tracks. Not overly predictable, and it keeps it kind of texturally very interesting to listen to as well. I think his concepts and kind of ideas electronically are very well done. I like a lot of the sounds that he picked. They're not overly kind of abrasive. And as you said, like, there's little things that are kind of Nine Inch Nails-esque, but nothing too much. Doesn't sound like he's trying to be Trent Reznor. And I think he does push some of the boundaries into other areas that are completely different from a band like Nine Inch Nails. Ex-Nomination, for example, way more ambient and ethereal, and the title track feels almost kind of European with the kind of synth sounds that he uses. And there's a couple of elements on the album that reminds me a little bit of Carpark North.
It's very Carpark North.
Yeah, I could hear it on Shadows, actually. It's got that kind of more R&B, kind of soulful type vibe that you get from a band like Carpark North. And I think I'll agree with Duncan. I think there are a good handful of tracks on this album that I really enjoyed. There are definite kind of single-like tracks on the release that are hooky. They've got really cool punchy drums, good bass lines, and good vocal melodies. There was a kind of whole kind of load of this, though, that felt a bit too kind of uneventful for me. I can see the appeal of the kind of ambient synths, you know, and the kind of drum loops with the kind of glitchy noises, but I felt like there were quite a few of those in the middle of the album, which kind of felt like a bit of a lull, if I'm honest. But I think that section of the kind of more restrained tracks is a conscious decision. I can hear how they are linked, and they absolutely blend well into the next kind of passage of the album, which is a little more drum heavy with kind of sounds that have a bit more kind of punch, but it didn't really do much for me personally. There are also some tracks that maybe just lack a bit more of a hook for it to become more memorable. And like I can clearly hear he's capable of that, because the tracks like Simulacrum and Hyperreal have that kind of those vocal moments that stick out a bit more. But I'm kind of like Duncan. I'm kind of a bit back and forth on this one, and it might be just down to my kind of personal taste. If you're into that kind of more ambient kind of sound, where not a huge amount happens, but it's very hypnotic and very spacious, then that might be right up your street. For me, there was a lot of cool sounds. The vocals sound, really warm and easy on the ear, but I kind of wanted a few more tracks that just left a bit more of an impression. I think Hyperreal for me is probably the best track on the album. I totally agree on the production. I think it's fantastic. I think I loved how kind of rich this sounds. The mix is really well adjusted. And the electronics are really interesting. I didn't feel like the synth or electronic sounds were like stock or cliche in any way. They were really, it was cool to hear. So I think there's a lot of potential here for me. I think this project has the potential to be really big in the future in the genre, but I'm not quite convinced it's all there yet for me personally. But I'm interested to hear kind of what happens next with this one. Ratings for this new one from Fern. Kyle, what did you rate Intersubjective?
Might be a banana coming up.
Can I give it a banana? I want to give it a banana. Yeah, five and a banana. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I get what you guys are saying, but I just fucking love that kind of stuff. So yeah, it just hit home for me so well. Everything about it just, okay, great. Wash me. Give me more. I
can totally see why you would enjoy that, just from your background and production and electronic music and stuff. I can totally see why you'd be totally all over this. Yep,
definitely so.
Duncan,
3.5. 3.5. Yeah, 3.5. Yeah, like I say, I think. Well, if you listen to my review, Kyle, I basically said half the album is like top notch and half the album isn't top notch. So if I then said 4 or above that, it would kind of it'd be against what I said. Like I say, I'm kind of like Dave. I think summarised it really well there. I think it's a really interesting concept, a really interesting idea, and when it's on for me, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant, and he clearly has it in him. It's very difficult to be able to pull out one, let alone a handful of songs that are of that level in a genre which you're not known for, using instruments that you're not really known for playing, and all those stuff kind of working together, intermingling. So I think the guy's got like crazy talent and crazy potential. I don't think it's fully there on this release. So 3.5 is where I'm coming in. Yeah,
I'd agree. I would have went 3.5 on this one as well. I think combination of the really good songs on this album plus the production for me is sitting about a 3.5 at the moment. Fern Intersubjective comes out on the 30th of September on Pelagic Records. Links below to the band's Facebook. I'll put a link to their Bandcamp as well, so you can check out the tracks, check out the pre-order, and let us know what you think. Stick some comments in below once you've heard it. Happy to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. We'll be back with another review very soon, but until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.